Can't hear, sorry. Can I also ask members to ensure that any mobile devices are switched to silent and don't cause any distraction during the meeting? And I remind everyone that the use of mobile devices for the taking or making of phone calls is not permitted in the chamber. Also, I'd like to inform members that this meeting is being filmed and the Council are broadcasting the stream of the meeting live to YouTube. Can I remind members that they are required to stand when addressing the Council meeting? We're not expecting a fire alarm tonight, but if one should occur, please follow the officers downstairs out of the front of the Town Hall to the assembly point. Would members please just take a moment to remember the recent passing of Harry Brooks, who was a long-serving councillor for the borough. Okay. Thank you, members. Thank you, everyone. Item 1 on the agenda, minutes of the meeting of the Council held on the 25th of September 2019. I will move those minutes. Mr Deputy Mayor, will you second those minutes?
I second those minutes, Madam Mayor.
All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Item 2 on the agenda, have we any declarations of interest? Thank you. Councillor Lishman? Thank you. Any other? Thank you. Item number 3 on the agenda, public questions. A request to speak has been received from Mr Ian Smith regarding the proposed development at Redleys Road, Cliviger. Mr Smith, will you please come forward? Okay. And you have 5 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Ian Smith. I'm the Managing Director of the Miller Homes Northwest business, and I've worked in the home building industry for 27 years, and for 22 of those I've held positions similar to the current position that I hold with other major builders. I hold an honours degree in town planning, awarded from the University of Cardiff in 1985. In those years I've been involved with a lot of planning applications, many of which have been non-contentious, but some of which have been highly controversial. In all cases I've had to rely on the planning system to deliver an outcome. The planning system on which we rely places the development plan right at the centre and is the roadmap which we are all required to follow. I am here to respectfully ask for your support to our proposals to build new homes and create a new community at Redleys Road on land which the Council has already identified for housing development in its adopted local plan. Miller Homes was formed in 1934 in Edinburgh and over the last 85 years has developed a proud history of delivering new homes to its customers and creating new communities from Scotland to the south of England. This year we will complete around 3,500 new homes, working through 8 regional businesses. We are the largest privately owned home builder in the UK and we have been awarded 5-star status for our customer satisfaction. Our experience so far of dealing with your planning department has been very positive. We have been made to feel very welcome in the borough and positively encouraged to assist in delivering new high-quality homes in accordance with the objectives of the adopted local plan. That experience changed at the Planning Committee of the 21st of August when some councillors voted to oppose our application. This evening I'm asking you to overturn that decision in line with the clear guidance which has been given by both your planning and legal officers. The Burnley local plan has formal legal status as the adopted development plan for the borough. It took several years to prepare and was rigorously scrutinised by a planning inspector appointed by government. As such, it sets the blueprint for future development in the borough, and as an adopted document has primacy in the planning process. Planning applications are supposed to be determined in accordance with the development plan unless other material reasons are evident. And your officers have made it clear that in their professional judgment, no such reasons exist. Local plans are designed to provide certainty for members of the public, for politicians, for the development industry, and for all those interested in and involved in the future use of land and buildings. Without a local plan, and many authorities do not have an adopted plan, the planning system becomes a free-for-all. With no established local blueprint, the development industry will seek to impose their own interpretation of what is appropriate. Burnley put into place an adopted plan as recently as last year, so it is very up to date. It helps those of us who are involved in creating and shaping new communities to know where we stand. But we have to be able to rely on the plan. Otherwise, conflict will ensue and the council is likely to face an expensive series of challenges via planning appeals. In the future, the council can, of course, review the plan and alter its policies, but that requires a new plan-making process to be pursued with the same level of robustness and scrutiny as before. The Redleys roadside is an attractive site, there is no doubt about that. I can see that not everyone might agree that it is inappropriate to build there. It was made clear to us from the outset by your planning officers that our proposals must be of the highest quality and reflect the sensitive location of the site on the edge of the town. We have endeavoured to meet that challenge with our scheme design, which in the professional judgment of your planning officers is of sufficient quality to recommend approval of the application. I sincerely hope that this evening you will be able to balance the competing views which exist in this room to reach a decision which accords with your own adopted local plan, and then to trust us, Miller Homes, to act as a responsible developer in delivering a scheme of good quality whilst taking into account the impact of doing so on the communities around us. We came to Burnley in the expectation that we would be able to work with rather than against the council, and so far the professional approach of your officers has enabled us to do that whilst holding us to account in ensuring that we meet all of the required objectives. If the decision this evening is to refuse the application, then that would set us on a course of conflict, and that is not what we desire. Working with a planning authority to achieve our mutual objectives is always our preference, as our business relies on the planning system to deliver our primary raw material, land. Planning appeals are expensive and time-consuming. Both sides of the dispute end up incurring high costs, which could be spent better elsewhere. And at a time when many authorities are having to make budget cuts, put cuts to public services, it seems to me that obstructing development, which the council has already accepted is appropriate in its local plan, would not be in the best interest of the borough. And I understand that for some of you this is a very difficult decision, that you simply do not feel that the land at Redleys Road should be subject to development. But I respectfully urge you, regardless of your personal viewpoints, to vote in favour of the application as it accords with the policy of the council, and there are no valid reasons to refuse it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Will you return to your seat? A request to speak has been received from Mr. Noordad Aziz regarding the motion on Srebrenica. Mr. Aziz, please come forward. Thank you. And you have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor, elected members and officers. Can I thank you for inviting me to speak about remembering Srebrenica and why it's important to recognise it on its 25th anniversary with a memorial in Burnley. A bit of background why I'm here. Even though I'm a councillor from a neighbouring borough, I am a board member for Remembering Srebrenica in the Northwest, having served as its chair in its 20th year of anniversary in 2014. I have been on 3 delegations out to Srebrenica, leading to and being part of one of the first by the Right Honourable Stephen Williams, a government minister in the coalition government, and when I research, I believe he is a former colleague to one of the members here today. The charity and the work was heavily influenced by the late and great Paddy Ashdown. He was one of the key campaigners in getting Srebrenica to be recognised as a genocide and instrumental in establishing Srebrenica Memorial Week in the UK and to have events take place to mark that. He played a massive role in getting aid to stranded Bosnians during the war, undertaking many aid missions, as well as when he retired from frontline politics, he returned to Bosnia-Herzegovina, where he served as the country's High Representative from 2002 to 2006. He managed to put Bosnia back together and start rebuilding for a new era. The permanent memorial for the Srebrenica genocide at Potocari received Paddy's personal assistant during this role when he sought funding from the international community and working with the mothers of Srebrenica to create a memorial for thousands of victims of genocide. Even now, remains today are being found and they will be identified to be buried on Memorial Day next year, which will be the 25th anniversary. Paddy shared his thoughts on the 20th anniversary. Nothing can diminish the culpability of those who perpetrated this genocide, but in condemning this evil, it is also right we acknowledge our passive complicity as members of the international community for what happened in the United Nations safe haven of Srebrenica. We could have prevented this horror, we chose not to. That was his words at the 20th anniversary of the Srebrenica genocide held in London. This highlights the aim of the Srebrenica Memorial Week is beyond political argument, and I will share the words of a Srebrenica survivor, Hassan Hassanovic, who lost his twin brother, his father, and uncle. He spoke why it's important to have Srebrenica Memorial Week and Memorial Week events. I think it's important for me to highlight what happened in Srebrenica in July 1995, where over 8,000 men and boys were killed, all because they were a different faith. And for me, the best form of revenge is education. Srebrenica was a genocide, the worst in Europe since the Second World War. And we all witnessed this in our homes. It was broadcast on the news. The important lessons that we must remember is that the 10 steps to genocide occur long before any killing does. They are the classification, us and them, the symbolization. We give names or symbols to a certain section of the community. Discrimination, a dominant group uses law, custom, and political power to deny the rights of other groups. Dehumanization, organization, genocide is always well organized and orchestrated.
Mr. Aziz, you've 30 seconds left.
I think, for me, it's important that we adopt this motion as stated, and not to dilute its aim, send a clear message that Burnley recognises the Srebrenica genocide, and as well as honouring other memorials like Holocaust Memorial Day, it will commemorate the 25th anniversary to challenge hate wherever it manifests itself. You will be joining Hyndburn, Blackburn, Pendle, Preston, Bolton, Manchester, Oldham and other borough council and district councils.
Thank you, Mr. Aziz. Your time's up, I'm afraid. Thank you to both those speakers this evening for coming to address the members of the council. Would members please note that as an item for decision by the council and a motion on both those issues follows, debate on the issue will be held over until the relevant points on the agenda. A request to speak has also been received from Clare Hales. Clare, will you come forward, please? And you'll have your 5 minutes.
It's only a quick one. Councillor Birtwistle has approached me and told me he's got answers, but I don't know which part he's got answers to because I was going to forget one because I have received answers by email.
Go.
Okay, so I'm here to talk about tree preservation orders and to try and get the council's support in, I don't know whether an emergency tree preservation order is a thing. There are residents on Balliol Close that back onto Burnley Bridge who were given assurances that the trees weren't going to be cut down, and there are very few trees remaining, they've all been cut down. These are the final trees that actually remain that are the barrier between those residents' gardens and a large industrial unit. They are mature trees, they're not oak trees, they're not a special type of tree, but residents are really worried that they're going to be cut down. So I would like the council's support in trying to preserve them, protect them, making it so that that land can't be cleared at any given point, which is what happened with the rest of the trees. Also, on Vicarage Avenue in Padiham, the land has completely legally been cleared of trees. It was in the paper recently. Contacted the council to see if any tree preservation orders had been breached, and they hadn't. There were no tree preservation orders on the trees. There's a large field next to Burnley Bridge Industrial Estate, what locals call the first field. It's just off Balliol Close. There are lots and lots and lots of trees on that field. It's owned by, well, there are two fields, but it's the first one that I'm concerned most about. There are lots of trees, and sorry, you set me off now. There are lots of trees, and I'm worried that that land, it's owned by the same people who has owned the industrial estate, and I am worried that that land, such as happened at Vicarage Avenue, could be cleared at any given time, and there is nothing that we could do about that. So I'm wondering whether it's possible that a tree preservation order be put on certain clumps of trees in that area. I don't know planning. I've emailed the council and I've had nothing back, and I would like the council's support in looking at that and trying to get me some answers.
Okay.
I also was down to talk about the flood defences, but okay, the flood defences, I've had residents contacting me about the flood defences in Padiham. They're very concerned that where they are, it's a resident of Bendwood Close in Padiham, she says that the water was about 4 inches away from coming over the wall, and what saved her house was the fact that the other side of the road flooded. A wall is proposed to be built at the other side of the river, so she's concerned that actually these flood defences that Padiham are getting actually further endanger her property because it almost came over last time. She raised lots of concerns, and those concerns have been sent to, I believe, the executive members that needed to know, and I believe you've got some answers in that regard. It was a very long email, so I won't go into all the details of what she said, but yeah, they were my questions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Emo, I believe you're going to respond to Mrs Hales.
Madam Mayor, the Council, tree officer and planning officer have been instructed to carry out a survey of the trees on the Burnley Bridge site and surrounding areas and report back to the Head of Green Spaces and Head of Development Control with their proposals. For where tree preservation orders have been appropriate, whenever development takes place, the Council will always encourage planting and landscaping schemes to improve screening and the appearance of developed areas where possible. The flood defence. We are following up the flood defence questions with the environmental agencies. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Birtwistle, did you want to speak?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. There was an exhibition in Padiham Town Hall that I was delighted to go and see about the development on the Baxi site about and the Homes Agency were there showing the plans of their homes, and the flood defences drawings were there. Now I'm an engineer, but I'm not a civil engineer, and I'm sure that if Clare Hales would like to, well, I can ask the officer responsible to send you the details of the defences situation regarding the Environment Agency. They will respond, I understand, in about 20 days. And if you've I understand that you've also got a problem from a lady that spoke to you to say that an email address is not working at Homes England. Well, we've checked that today, and I'm not a brilliant person on computers. In fact, this is quite a new thing to me. And I can assure you that the thing is now working, and they are more than happy to receive late correspondence regarding the development at the backside site if you would wish your resident or you wish to send a document to them tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we move on to item 4 on the agenda, which are items for decision by the Council? Can I point out to members that items for decision by the Council are treated as motions? Once a proposal has been moved and seconded, members may only speak once and for a maximum of 5 minutes. Members may then only speak again on an amendment. Item 4A on the agenda, land west of Redleys Road, Cliviger. May I remind members that they are in receipt of information at item 7 on the agenda, which is confidential as it is subject to legal privilege. This material must not be referred to in the public debate. Any member wishing to refer to this material must first move the exclusion of the public as per item 6 on the agenda. Members are reminded of point 19 of the Council's Procedure Rules, Part 4A of the Council's Constitution, and Access to Information Rules, Part 4B of the Council's Constitution, points 10.4, Exempt and Confidential Information, and 10.5, Communication of Proceedings to the Public and Press, which also apply here. May I also ask all members, and in particular those who sat on the Development Control Committee, to confirm that they have come to consider this planning application with an open mind. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Following the debate, there will be a brief opportunity for members to seek points of clarification from the planning officer before we go to the vote, but no further debate. Who will move the motion?
I'll move that, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second it, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cant. Any member? Councillor Towneley.
Colleagues, we're here because the local plan, a plan formulated by so few, has been tested and found wanting. Predictably, the first time at its first ill-conceived developments failed to gain the confidence of the Development Control Committee, a committee which those in the public gallery may like to know has statutory delegated powers to take these difficult decisions, or so we thought, until it makes a decision that, whilst good for the borough and our community, substantially contradicts the single vision of certain individuals embodied in this local plan. And so, naughty us, we've been summarily drummed into re-education to reverse that decision, a decision many of us feel both on and off the Development Control Committee is indisputably right for the borough on so many levels. Some colleagues will undoubtedly argue that we cannot go against the local plan no matter how ill-conceived, especially as our plan was confirmed by the Secretary of State and Planning Inspectorate less than a year ago. But I say no matter how well this plan was written, no matter that it crosses every T and dots every I for the planning wonks, if it alienates or alarms, even at this early stage in its life, so many elected members who strive to further the interests of this borough and hold the best interests of our community at heart, it is obviously not fit for purpose. Now we have all the received training, understood the warnings of the possible consequences of reaffirming the decision of the DC committee, but dire though the consequences may be, is that a reason to roll over, to betray what we feel to be in the best interests of our residents, our town, our landscape and the borough? Do we debate and decide out of fear or conviction? I believe there are aspects of doubt that are respectable grounds for refusal, and I know more practice colleagues will be putting these forward in turn. In short, my objections are comprised around the following: size, design, the lack of educational provision and environmental aspiration, the unnecessary extension of the urban boundary, the lack of sequential development of our brownfield sites in preference, and the unnecessary sacrifice of our landscape rather than the regeneration of our urban centre. The poverty of the pick box design, based on its a northern town, so let's give them some of those. No thought for individuality of person or place, the lack of affordable provision for the young of my ward, Cliviger and Worsthorne, whose needs have been singularly ignored in the rush by the developer to maximise profits before community. And finally, let me remind you that this is only the first of such scandalously large developments to pop up in the borough, because unwittingly, we seem to have signed up to some of the most intensive housing expansion our borough has ever seen. 200 houses a year. What madness is this? Open season on our countryside, ribbon development, constant infill versus ageing infrastructure, both roads and utilities, lack of educational provision, stretched medical services, all things that matter more to the long-term sustainability of our borough than the quick buck or added council tax. The educational element, which I perceive is one of our strongest reasons for refusal, less than half of what we need, and believe me, our schools are stuffed to the gunnels and expected to take a generational bulge. 423 children in 5 years' time across the borough, 16 secondary and 38 primary from this site alone, and we have a developer who is only willing to give just under £500,000 of the agreed section 106, less than half of that which is required. I don't hear Lancashire or the AZLEA celebrating at this pittance, which leaves future children with, I would call, a serious educational deficit, and the environmental and landscape aspect of the scheme. This local plan sees the landscape as something to be exploited. Lucky us that we have quite a land bank. We can just build and build on all our surrounding countryside. After all, you can always go to another borough if you want any of that. Every extension into the landscape damages the green lung of Burnley. And not only that, it makes us more and more a one-trick pony. By building over our landscape, our countryside, we limit our children's engagement with nature and the viability of fresh rural enterprise and the recreational economy, which still remains embryonic in this borough because of the tunnel vision of how this local plan has been concocted. Indeed, this plan only pays lip service to rural enterprise and the environment, believing we are better served by surrounding the town with a wall of industrial parks, spawning rush hour tailbacks through the week with all the fog of carbon monoxide, which we are outraged to learn are such a debilitating effect on our and our children's brains. Sustainable, a word so often used, but lacking in definition, which I find staggering, and yet it is bandied around in this application to meaningless effect. A sustainable development? Really? Where are the assets to prove this? Is there a green energy source for this community?
Are you almost ready to wrap it up?
I am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Has it an internal sewage system generating heat? Has the building of these homes added to the safety and encouragement of the unmotorised user of the highway? No. In fact, Lancashire Highways have admitted that the likelihood of the proposed speed restrictions will not be enforceable, and the area by the access will actually be made more unusable in safety by cyclists and horse riders because it will take over the verges on both sides. This will mean little to most of you, but the Redleys Road is the only arterial link between the safe multi-user routes of Towneley and the public bridleway system as it starts at Foxstone Lane. Sustainable non-motorised travel, exercise and recreation.
I'm going to have to stop you, I'm afraid, Councillor Towneley.
Yet another casualty of this development. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Birtwistle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I rise to speak tonight and I feel like I've got a gun loaded with a £100,000 bullet to my head to make a decision on something here that I honestly believe to my heart is wrong. It is totally unsustainable, and I mentioned this in the planning committee. I believe it's unsustainable because it doesn't look to the future. It doesn't provide educational facilities for our future young people. The schools, as Councillor Towneley has said, are full now. There is no facility within this proposal to provide new school facilities. The only, on the primary and junior side, the suggestion is that young children going living in those houses will have to travel from Redleys Road at the top of Burnley down to Springfield School down in Burnley Wood. That is one hell of a distance. Now, it could be said that the people who buy these houses have got 1, 2, 3, or even 4 cars, and they'll have no problem taking the children to school. But is that what we want to do? Is that what we really want to do? Build houses where people with cars have to take the children to school? That's not what I want. Cars, as we all know, are ruining in our atmosphere. They ruin our future. I am a father and I am a grandfather. And for me to think that I have a 5-year-old grandchild who has to get up in the morning at 7 o'clock in the real world if they don't have a car and catch a bus from Redleys Road down into Burnley Town Centre and then catch another bus up to Burnley Wood to be educated and then to catch the return bus in the afternoon fills me with horror. And if anybody in this room has had a child, and I'm sure they all have, and I'm sure quite a number have grandchildren, and looking around, there might be an odd one or two that have got great-grandchildren, then it might be well worth thinking about these children's futures. Also, the developers offered some money for that. The County Council wanted £1 million. What has been offered is £570,000, which is fine, there's not a problem with that, but the point is the school should be provided in the area where these houses are being built. Secondly, another thing that really that makes it unsustainable is the health provision. We don't have a doctor's surgery in Burnley that has a vacancy. At the moment, you can ring a doctor's surgery, and if you are lucky to get an appointment within a week or even 2 weeks, or maybe just before you die, before you get there, you are very, very fortunate. There isn't a doctor's surgery near to the site. There isn't a doctor's surgery anywhere near the area that has got a vacancy. Now, I'm being told by the planners, and I'm sure the planners are working within the rules of what we've got. I didn't vote for this local plan. We explained all this when the local plan was being developed, that these things, the infrastructure has to be put in place before we have the houses. Fine, and we have with the infrastructure and the houses follow. That, to me, makes sense. You don't put the cart before the horse. You have the horse and then you stick a cart on the back of it when everything's sorted out. This, to me, and I'm told that this is not an issue that we can talk about. I'm sorry, this is an issue I want to talk about. The people that live in that area really, really need to be considered. The people who live there now need to know that their infrastructure will be affected, need to know that their environment will be affected. And I'm told there are no rare birds or anything on that site. But the wildlife that's on that site now might not be under threat. But if we constantly dig the sites up, they very well soon be under threat because we were taking them away. And I'm sure that Mr. Smith's company, when they bulldoze these fields clear, I'm sure that they treat
30 seconds.
I'll be finished. I'm sure that they treat what they take up with some consideration and reprocess it all and ensure that anything that they find in there that's important is put back in the atmosphere. But surely, do we want to really put the sustainability of site under threat? I voted against it before. I am worried about the £100,000 bullet that's been pointed at my skull, that the gentleman from that Mr. Smith has said they will go to an appeal and ensure the council have to pay this money that could well spend on something else. Could they not come with a better scheme, a better deal, and provide more money for the young people that need the education? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I can honestly say I wasn't involved with the local plan on the final decision. It's here before us. I accept it 100% regarding grade, including the provisional scheme for Red Lees Road. However, tonight we're not discussing the local plan. The time for that has gone. We're now talking about a particular proposal for development on this site. I find many objections to this, being that mainly it conflicts with policies SP2, SP5, IC3, IC4, HS1 and HS4 of the local plan. Now, if I do bear your indulgence for this, because I have the material reasons here, and if you cut me off mid-floor, then I don't know where we'll go. First of all, policy SP2, housing requirement, and policy HS1. The site is acceptable for 125 dwellings. This, being an ex-teacher, you'll like the visual aids, this is a 2-bedroomed house, this is a 3-bedroomed house, this is a 4-bedroomed house. You can see the scale. The HMA report needs the number of dwellings, and that's calculated on people, not properties, people, and that relates back to dwellings. For each site, the dwellings were calculated on this basis to show 2, 3 and 4-bedroom dwellings. The basis of the number of dwellings on this site was estimated at 30% 2-bed, 30% 3-bed and 40% 4-bed. The developer has chosen just at a 3 and 4-bed. On this basis, we would expect 37.5 2-bed, forgive the halves, 37.5 3-bed and 54 bed. The developer has applied for 52 3-beds and 77 4-beds. A 2-bed dwelling typically has a floor area of 65 square metres, a 3-bed 80 and a 4-bed 120. So a 4-bed is typically 1.82 times the floor area of a 2-bed and a 3-bed 1.2. On this basis, the site should contain 107 properties. And by increasing the number of dwellings as proposed, means that the site is more compact and across roads reduced impossible, with leading to the concerns with policy IC3 and 4. I also fully support LCC's rejection of this basis on the fact that it's not getting the money. So I'll roll to that page now. Would you bear that 1 second while I turn over? LCC object to this application is insufficient funding under Section 106 contributions. LCC outlined a strong case in support of their needs for a substantial financial contribution of some 610,000 for primary school places and 387 for secondary. LCC have agreed that any funding not required due to a change in circumstances would be returned to the developer. Planning officers carried out a viability study of the site to determine the maximum contribution that could be requested, based on the methodology used in the local plan viability assessment report from HDH Planning and Development Limited, published in March 2017. Using up-to-date figures, they calculated a maximum of 1.12 million that could be available from Section 106 contributions. Above this figure, the viability of the site could be in jeopardy. The applicant has agreed to provide this sum. The proposals published tonight suggests that the S106 contribution is split, with 476k going to LCC and 644k coming to this council as a contribution towards affordable housing. This council reports at every normal meeting on the achievement of its strategic objectives, and one of the prime concern of all councillors is the education of the children of the borough. We set great score on providing our children with access to the education they not only deserve, but also the best we can provide. I propose that the objections of LCC regarding the proposal and effects on policy IC4 are valid, and the council tonight support their request for Section 106 funding in full. I propose that we seek agreement from the developer that the Section 106 money's total of 1.12 is invariable, and that any money returned by LCC will go to offset the reduced contribution to affordable housing at the start. In this way, we remove the objection from LCC and demonstrate this council's resolve to offer the best possible choices to our children. Policy IC3, car parking standards. My mouth's going dry now.
Half a minute.
Very good. Put me off mid-prime. I'm sure the judicial review will appreciate it. The development is shown and described following Appendix 9 with respect to individual plots. There is no parking provision for visitors, as shown in Appendix 9, C3, visitor unallocated of 0.25 spaces to dwelling, a total of 32 spaces. The officer recommendation, para 5 before us tonight, states that the new estate road and access between the site be constructed in accordance with LCC spec for construction of estate roads. LCC spec states on page 6, para 1.15, design criteria, that the proposal shall meet LCC's guide creating civilised streets. LCC's creating civilised street policy shows on-street parking suggests that spaces 2 by 6 metres long are created in the new road structure, allowing accommodations for 4 vehicles per overall space. In total, some of these would be required. That also means that, don't worry, it'll come back at you. Also means basically that by making the site more bigger,
going to have to stop you.
It's okay. By making it bigger, then we can't fit in the extra car parking requirements because it means the roads.
Right, stop you there,
and you want me to stop me at that and ignore all the other material factors. I just want that recording minuted that I was objecting to.
You've had your 5 minutes.
Okay.
If this is supposed to take place instead of the planning meeting, at the planning meeting, would we be all restricted to the 5-minute speak? Because normally we get to discuss, and we're being restricted in specifically what councillors want to say to 5 minutes. Seems unfair when he's got a heck of a lot of documentation there, information specifically about the plan and about this particular application. We should be able to hear everything he's got to say. Something seems unfair.
Councillor Baker, how much more have you got?
Only a couple of pages.
You haven't got another 20 minutes or anything?
No, it's about 5 minutes. To be honest, and it's well worth listening to. Because I'm not against the proposal. I just think we need to change it a bit, adapt it a bit more so that everybody ends up happy. Right. Development quality and sustainability. Condition 17 states that no dwelling shall be first occupied unless it's got a 13-amp socket ready for car charging. The reason stated it meets our policies. The provision of a 3 kilowatt charging point is laudable, but technology has now superseded this option, and with new buildings a 7.2 kilowatt charger provided. A 7.2 kilowatt charger cuts the charging period to 9 hours from 26 hours, providing overnight charging. It also reduces the amount of power required by 20 to 30%, thus saving energy through the future. It will also be possible at the building stage to make provision for 2 chargers. The cabling is thicker because it's 32 watts compared to 32 amps compared to 13 amps, but it can be done at the beginning stage fairly easily. The rest of it goes on to that. Having said that one, because of this, the charging power, we might need some electrical heating in time goes by, sustainability again, because gas central heating is being removed, etc. We're going to need more than the standard 100 amp power supply that goes to each house. And I would ask the developer to ask the utility companies to fit a 150 or even a 200 amp power supply to it. And again, no reason for that if they can't do it. Condition 28, notwithstanding the provisions of the TCP Act General Permitted, the garages hereby approved shall remain available at all times for the parking of a motor vehicle and not be altered to provide habitable space. Utter madness. Right, to ensure that car parking levels, again, because the site is so cramped and compact inside itself, we haven't got the space for longer drives or anything like that. I made a site visit last week to one of the developers' other sites, excellent product, to view the Chadwick style of property. The size of the lounge, while spacious, I didn't feel was big enough to meet the requirements of today's purchaser. And the sales agent said, over 75% of buyers, stroke potential buyers, expressed the same concerns and intended to convert the garage to another habitable room. The imposition of this condition will likely make the initial and subsequent sales of the property difficult, if not impossible. And in my experience, a solicitor will highlight this condition to his client and possibly advise against purchase. The effect of this condition is therefore to frustrate SP3, design and layout. And I think I'm on my last bit now, you'll be glad to hear. Right. Policy HS4 housing developments. New housing developments should be high quality. The schemes of more than 50. In addition, the council will require new housing developments to provide private and functional space for occupants. I've got half a page. The proposed development lists 8 styles of property, 3 of which are 3 bedrooms and 5 are 4 bedrooms. The local plan does not specify a minimum size of a habitable room, described as a bedroom. Burnley Council's minimum size for a bedroom defined in its HMO strategy is 6.5 square metres. None of the 3-bedroom properties offered here possess a third bedroom equal to or in excess of this figure. The proposed sizes are 4.82, 5.72 and 5.93. None of the 3 proposed dwellings will meet the requirements of published HS4 para 3A. Most teenagers prefer a double bed, which itself occupies 3. We'll cut that bit out. Student accommodation, currently under construction, has single rooms of some 13.5 square metres. We can specify a minimum size of 6.5. The developer has a range of similar styles and overall sizes within his current portfolio, such as the Windsor, Orwell, Kipling and Mallory, with third bedroom sizes of 8.89, 8.82, 9.2 and 10 square metres respectively. 2 of the styles, Orwell and Mallory, also have integral garages, and the Kipling has an attached garage in option. Certainly 2 of these 3-bedroom styles lend themselves to sustainable development by conversion of the garage if condition 28 is revoked. So I think you can see where I'm going. We need to change the conditions. We don't need to go to court. It just needs to say, yeah, let's stop it at that. Let's look at it again, resubmit something that makes everybody happy. And as he said tonight, he wants to work with us. I think we've got it, Councillor Baker. Made the point. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Well done. Councillor Ferrier.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Colleagues, and also assure you, I won't be quite as in-depth as my colleague, as entertaining as it was. Colleagues, we have over 2,000 empty homes. Why are we breaking virgin sod? Why are we extending the urban boundary? Why do we not sequentially develop? Why is there a deficit in the educational provision, the lack of medical provision, sustainable transport and living provision? This is the wrong housing, for the wrong place, for the wrong reason, and it's time this chamber had the strength of our convictions to make the right choice for our landscape, community and our borough. Other councillors have authorised grounds for refusal. I urge you to consider them carefully before coming to a decision. But how is this for at least a silver lining for its rather large cloud? That the S106 legal agreement is subject to the rededication for all public footpaths within the application site as public bridleways, on the grounds that a person cycling will, in effect, be breaking the law in the light that the future upgrade of the rights of way enable sustainable, non-motorised travel across the borough. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ferrier. Councillor Newhouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to thank our colleagues, both colleagues, for how much effort and detail they've put into their proposals tonight. We've sat and listened to a planning meeting where the planning councillors decided they were against it. We've had additional training to say that's the same again pretty much, but listening to the information that we've been provided tonight does give material concerns to the problems that this site does have, and I think on that note that I will again be rejecting this application tonight. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Gordon Lishman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As you know, I'm a relatively new member of this council and an even newer member of the Development Control Committee. And I'm therefore deferring to colleagues I've already heard on the specific planning matters that are talked about, and I'm listening carefully to what they say before I take my final decision on how to vote. And I'm therefore not going to be as passionate as either Councillor Birtwistle or Councillor Towneley, and the good news is I'm not going to be quite as long as Councillor Baker. However, I do thank my colleague for drawing attention to what seemed to several of us here to be a significant underlying problem with this approach. Councillor Johnston and Councillor Birtwistle at the DC meeting expressed very strong reservations with the process that is leading to this meeting tonight. And Councillor Newhouse has already referred to some of those things. If we have an established process and way of doing things, then it seems to me we need to abide by the obligation to use those processes, to listen to them and to take our decisions in that way. But to add to that problem, we're now having a special meeting called at relatively short notice, where on this and on other important items on our agenda, a decision could well be taken as a result of who could actually attend. And I think given the balance of this council, it's really pretty unfortunate that we get ourselves into a position where decisions may be taken randomly from meeting to meeting because people have made arrangements to be away. I note the absence of the leader of the Labour group. I could refer to him not bothering to attend the meeting. That would be entirely unfair, almost as unfair as he, when he made the same allegation about Councillor Margaret Lishman and myself in relation to the meeting which adopted the local plan on an arbitrarily chosen changed date after we had already arranged to go on a holiday. This is not, Madam Mayor, the way we should be making proper decisions for the future of the town. We should be looking to take our decisions at meetings where we have proper notice, proper chance to put those things into our diaries and to take decisions. Part of our problem is that we're constrained in this discussion by national policies. National policy which determines the nature of the plan and which has determined a great deal of the planning law to which we are subject. The current intention on that was made clear recently by the Secretary of State. I'm sure all of the members here will have read their copy of First magazine as closely as me, and will have noticed the Secretary of State talking about significantly increasing from 90% the number of developer applications which were successful and using his powers in order to do that. We are also constrained in looking at the new greenfield sites by decisions that government has made about where it is going to invest in enabling local housing to take place. And the problem this council faces is set by a number of decisions of central government which constrain our capacity for decision to an extent which is beyond anything that is acceptable. Reference has been made here to Section 106 money. Officers are aware that I've had some concerns already about how we take those decisions and how they're applied. I hadn't actually realised until this evening that if there is a failure to utilise that money as agreed, then it simply goes back to the developer. Now, if you just think about the implications of that, and then you look at the material that's before us, it is actually first looking at the numbers of predicted and allocated school places and showing that there is a significantly larger number of predicted school places over the next few years than there are of actual places that are going to be available. It says here that the decision on Section 106 money on these things is dependent on the willingness of the school governing body to expand. It would seem to me to be a reasonably obvious question, given that significant amounts of money are at stake here, for us to say, well, when you've talked to those school governing bodies about whether they are willing to expand, about how they will cope with the long-term revenue implications of extra capital spend, whether they are in fact willing to take on that responsibility. Because if you haven't had that conversation and they're not willing to do it, what then happens is that you're simply giving the money back to the developer. And we're being asked tonight to take a decision without information. I don't know if it's available or not, but it's certainly not being given to us, without information about whether that money will be accepted and whether or not it can be properly spent. And that does seem to me very much to support the view which Councillor Baker is putting forward, that says if this full council is going to take a decision on this application, we oughtn't to do so just on the basis of a debate tonight without the capacity to have the sort of discussion which the Development Control Committee normally has. We ought to be looking at a process which enables the council, as a full council if necessary, to take a properly informed decision about the application that is before us. People had to have planning training, if they hadn't already had it, before they came tonight. That's pretty useless if they are not allowed in practice to apply what they've learnt from that training, because the format of this meeting necessarily is so different from that of a development control meeting. And I would very much hope that it would be possible for all parties on this council, and I think it is a matter for parties to look at the overall policy on this, to consider the views of quite large numbers of members and say, look, there's got to be a better way of taking a proper decision on this in the interests of people of the town.
Councillor Fewings.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, so I've listened carefully to our speaker this evening. I've reread the officer's report and additions for this meeting following the planning meeting on August 21st. As we said, I've come here with an open mind, but that's notwithstanding that I'm confident this matter should not actually be here. The committee decision, although poorly documented, was not a substantial departure from the local plan, so I don't agree with the fact that we have it here today. I'm also cognizant of the fact that this was designated as a site that was in principle acceptable for 125 houses in the local plan. However, the fact that this site has been earmarked for development does not mean we should accept any old application, no matter how flawed it is. My issue with the specific contents of the application before us is that I don't see how it satisfies key criteria set out in the local plan. One of my concerns from the August Development Control meeting has been addressed since, and I welcome that. But I'm afraid that is not enough for me to be convinced that this is now all of a sudden compliant with the local plan. I welcome the officer's comments on how they feel it meets the list of criteria in the plan that I will speak to shortly, but I do not accept that the onus is on us to provide evidence to the contrary, when no evidence has actually been provided in support of the comments in the first place. Just because these local plan policies are referenced in the officer's report before us does not mean they are actually complied with the local plan. So I'm about to jump into the specific policy references, so people in the public gallery bear with me. So firstly, it's worth noting that policy SP5 states, and I quote, "The Council will seek high standards of design, construction and sustainability in all types of development. Proposals will be expected to address the following minimum requirements." The key word here being minimum. So at SP51A, it will incorporate measures to minimise energy and water consumption. And although the application does go beyond building regulations, they're generally accepted by anyone in the, looking at energy efficiency as wholly inadequate. At SP51C, they should seek opportunities for on-site energy supply from renewable energy and low-carbon energy resources. At SP51D, they should seek opportunities to contribute to local and community-led renewable and low-carbon energy initiatives. And what we need to be very clear about, that these aren't either or. They have to tick all of those boxes. So just because they have made it energy efficient doesn't mean that they don't have to look at renewable energy on the buildings. So there is a view that was expressed at the development control meeting that the outside world doesn't actually add any context to materiality, but completely dispensing with these minimum requirements in light of a climate emergency adds colour to the point that this application is a wholesale departure from these minimum requirements, and those requirements are material planning considerations. SP2D requires enhancing or mitigation of biodiversity loss. The inclusion of a small green area does not mitigate the huge biodiversity loss as set out in the consultation responses from local environmental groups. SP2E, it should have respect for their landscape setting. This is an extension of the urban boundary. Setting all the houses back a tiny amount from the road is not respecting the landscape. SP2F, if it should be orientated to make good use of daylight and solar gain, no consideration at all has been given to solar gain. SP3A, this is a key gateway, and this is one of the key points that I think everyone needs to understand because it's being glossed over. It's designated in the local plan as a key gateway. In SP3A, that means that in its design, at Roman numeral 2, it should have landmark tree planting. Well, I'm sorry, but this cannot be described as landmark tree planting. And at Roman numeral 4, a carefully designed, gentle transition from countryside to the town. There is no evidence to suggest that this has been complied with. Again, setting the houses back a little bit from the road does not address the issues for a key gateway. Turning to the other areas of the plan, HS21C says requiring the provision of affordable housing through all housing developments of over 10 units. This is 129 units. HS23, Roman numeral 1, says this should be on-site unless it compromises viability. The officer's report says in allowing a financial contribution instead of complying with the obligations to provide affordable housing in our town, that it would affect its viability, but it offers no justification for this. Evidence should be provided. A conservative estimate of the value of these houses puts the total value of over 32 million. It is just unfathomable to me that we feel it would be unavoidable to provide social housing here. How much profit does this developer actually need? I note that since the August Development Control meeting, the application now complies with HS44, providing the required amount of homes for disabled people. I welcome that revision, and I think it demonstrates that we should be robust in ensuring that this application does not depart from the requirements of the local plan, as it does in the ways that I've set out above. On the issue of school funding, and lots of people have addressed this already, in the officer's report, I respectfully suggest that the officer has erred on the interpretation. The District Council, i.e. Burnley, can accept a lower amount, but the key words, which are a direct quote from this report, are where such amounts can undermine attempts to regenerate the area. And that's on page 26, third from last paragraph and the last paragraph. That is just simply not relevant here. This is open countryside and it is not being regenerated. It is being extinguished. Accepting a smaller contribution here would be in the interest of the developer's profits, and it is unconscionable. I therefore submit that the LCC objection stands and is valid. Turning to the point about there being a ceiling of 1.12 million, this is reached because they are being allowed to make a payment in respect of affordable housing. If they were actually providing the affordable housing that they should be providing on the site, then we would be nowhere near the 1.12 million that they need to provide, so therefore we would be able to have all of the funding for the education provisions that are required. I've seen no evidence suggest this multi-million-pound profit venture would be affected by complying with HS2, and if money is being provided instead of complying, then it should not contribute to the 1.12 million ceiling put on this site. I welcome clarification on how these discrepancies with the local plan requirements have been addressed. If there is more evidence outside of that contained in the report, I will look at it, but at the moment I'm not satisfied that this can be approved under the local plan. Thank you.
Councillor Anwar.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm a little bit disappointed that we're here this evening talking about this planning application. And the reason that I'm a little bit disappointed is because I feel that I've got to come here and justify a decision that I made in development control in the committee. And I find that disappointing because when I became a councillor, one of the things that I was made to understand was that the Development Control Committee has delegated powers, delegated authority on behalf of this council to make decisions. And we make those decisions based on the information that we're provided and the information in front of us, and we make those decisions based on the principles that we stand for. So I made a decision based on my values, my principles, and that's why I feel that I've got to justify myself here to full council to bring this application back. Now, I just want to explain what some of the, and they've been touched on already by other colleagues, but I want to explain some of the reasons for why I voted against this application. And I'm yet to hear an argument to the contrary. So, and again, I've come with an open mind, so I will listen to the debate and I will make up my mind, but I'm yet to hear an argument that says that this is good for our town. And the first thing that I want to say is that I accept that this is part of our local plan. Okay, the local plan has been adopted, it's part of the local plan. But one thing that I object to is that whenever we get developers, why do they always want to build on countryside and on farmland? Why is it always on the countryside? I can't understand that. There's other areas where they could build. Now, just because the local plan says up to 125 houses doesn't mean that the developers have got to come with a plan that says 125 houses or exceed that and put 129 on there just for the sake of profit. I disagree with that because I use that area every single weekend. I use it for running, I use it for walking. It's a beautiful part of our town. As you come into the town, it's a gateway into the town, and you come into Burnley, you think, what a beautiful place. Sticking 129 houses on there, I don't feel would be the right thing to do for that community or for this town. So that's one of the other reasons. LCC requested around £1 million for this development towards school places. We've heard from other colleagues that there are actually no school places in any of our schools in Burnley. I work in education, none of our schools have got any places. But they've not even offered that £1 million that we need, or that the LEA have requested. What they've done is offered 400,000 or 500,000, half of that. I think that's unfair to those people who support education and all of us and for the education of the children in our town. And I think it's unfair, and that's one of the other reasons that they are not valuing education. As an educator, I think that's wrong. That's one of the other reasons, but we don't have the places. Where would these children go to school, even if the places were there? The other reason that I went against this is because we talk about affordable housing. But the affordable housing offer that's been put to us is not actually in that part of town. It's not in Cliviger. So what they're doing is saying, we'll give you £600,000, but take it, but put the affordable housing somewhere else. Why? So we can have one area that's for affluent people who can afford that, and also our areas are divided on ethnicity and socio-economic backgrounds. Is that the ambition that the developers have got for our town? It's not the ambitions that I have for my town. Thank you.
It's a point of order, Madam Mayor. More than anything. I hear what my colleague says here, and the reason for this meeting tonight is decided. The committee was advised by the senior solicitor prior to the vote that a resolution to refuse that the committee would not have delegated authority to pass such a resolution, as this would be a decision that would be substantially contrary to the local plan. You've heard my reasons. Yeah. They weren't described at the meeting because, to be fair, councillors are people. We're not planners. We feel for the people. We feel what's right. We feel what's wrong. And we can't always put it into words. So we shouldn't be having this meeting at all. And I would suggest we say, put it back to development control and just support them and stand by it, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Baker. Madam Mayor's just asked me to say a few words on this. The Constitution is quite clear on this point, and as all members are aware, we have sought external advice which clarifies that the matter needs to be referred to full council for final determination.
So I must respond to that, Madam Mayor, on the fact that, yes, I agree with what you're saying, but if you read the external legal advice, which I'm not prepared to divulge, it does say, and it gives the reasons why that stance was taken. And one of the immediate things was bearing in mind the objections that were raised, and there were no material things supporting it. That was why that legal advice was given to us. If we'd given the right question in the first place and the facts to support it, it might have been totally different legal advice.
Well, we are where we are, aren't we? We are where we are anyways. Yeah. Councillor Hussain.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I'm not on the development committee, and I was previously on, but I wasn't on. I read through the application and the information that was given, and I was wondering why the reasons why it's come to committee and come back to the full council. I don't understand the reasons why, and if the officers or whoever could have given an explanation as to why it's come and what sort of reasons should we look at, because I'm sat here from not knowing what, just having read the application, but not knowing what information that's been privy to, like the development people on development control have been. So, for example, we've heard Councillor Baker, I'm not sure if you're on the development control, but he gave, but he gave such a resounding sort of rebuttal of the application in terms of the material reasons why we should be using it. And for those of us who are not on development control, it's kind of sort of, you know, how do we make our decision? You know, on what basis, what information do we need to, you know, take into account? Both Councillor Towneley and Councillor Anwar have been more emotional and been talking about, you know, the town as a whole and how they see it and so on. Yeah. Whereas Councillor Baker has been giving us information more on the materialistic consideration that we need to take in order to make that decision. So it would be welcoming if the officers gave some, you know, information as to on the basis of the on the merits of the application. Okay. Thank you.
Members, we are going to make this decision tonight. It's been referred to us and we are going to make the decision tonight. Does any member wish to raise a point of clarification with the planning officer? Janet, would you like to come to the microphone? Councillor Townley.
I'd just like to reiterate my colleague's last comment that the Section 106 legal agreement be subject to the rededication of all footpaths within the application site's public bridleways on the grounds that any person cycling will in effect be breaking the law, and in the light that future upgrade of the rights-of-way may enable sustainable non-motorised travel through the borough.
Chair, it is for members to decide if they wish to request an additional item be negotiated with the applicant in respect of the Section 106 agreement that is already referred to in the agenda report. At the moment, the Section 106 agreement would cover two items, which is education and affordable housing. And if a third item was to be put within, was to be requested, then that could potentially cover, for instance, the rededication of public footpaths as bridleways. I can inform members that following a discussion with the applicant would be willing to agree to the rededication of the public footpath 88, which crosses the southern boundary of the site as a bridleway. The other public footpaths which cross the site, footpaths 89 and 90, and they will run along the estate roads, in which case there is no practical benefit in terms of rededicating those as bridleways, in which case I would recommend, if that was moved, that the rededication be to public footpath 88. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Hussain, do you have a point of
I've
clarification?
got a couple of questions. And first one, I think, because I wasn't on the development control committee making those decisions, you've probably answered them. But I need some assurances from yourselves or the planners in terms of what's what. In terms of the Burnley local plan, it was stated 125 houses. So why has it gone to 129? That's one of the reasons I want to know. And another question would be, social housing takes place within development. If you look at nationally and everywhere else, social housing takes place where the development is. So why is it being fobbed off, like Councillor Anwar said, and being money given to elsewhere? Why? What's the reason? That's the reason. Thirdly, what Councillor Baker said in terms of material consideration, in terms of refusal and so on. Is he correct in what he said? Or has he just made up all that gibberish for us to make that decision? Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to answer those first?
So first of all, your question was about, sorry, could you remind me? First one.
From 125 to 129.
Sorry,
you turn your microphone off.
Oh, sorry.
The policy HS1, which allocates the site, states that the site is suitable for around 125 dwellings. So it doesn't say up to 125 dwellings, it says around 125 dwellings. It's a general figure which gives an indication of what amount of housing can be accommodated on that site. And that adds to the overall housing requirement which is set out in policy SP2. So 129 houses would be adequately regarded as around that figure, and no reasonable person could argue that 129 can't be defined as around that figure. Secondly, in terms of affordable housing, policy HS2 on affordable housing requires, in most instances, for affordable housing to be on site, unless a justification is put forward to the contrary. In this instance, the council officers have accepted that there is a justification for putting that affordable housing off-site. And that justification relates partially to the aims that there are for this site in providing a good quality housing, particularly larger houses, 3, 4-bedroomed, detached, semi-detached houses, which will encourage people to who are looking for those type of houses to move to the borough or to remain in the borough, and that is an aspiration of the council in terms of allocating those particular attractive sites. So that is partly justification for allowing that, and also it is noted in the report before you tonight that there are other benefits to the council, because taking an off-site contribution would allow the council to use that money, for instance, in bringing empty homes into use in locations, more urban locations, and locations which are going to be suitable for the needs of affordable housing. Thirdly, material considerations which have been put forward in terms of having more smaller houses on the site, in terms of bedroom sizes and parking spaces, etc. There's quite a few things that have been mentioned. In terms of the numbers of houses, as it's been said, that qualifies as around the figure. Thank you. If you were to have smaller houses on the site, yes, you could end up with a more dense development, because that figure of houses could rise, and it would still be considered as around 125. Given that the local plan policy particularly seeks larger houses on this site, I don't feel that would be a robust argument to pursue in terms of a reason for refusal. I don't think it lets the application down. I think in this instance it echoes a a high quality development which meets the aims and objectives that the council have for this site. In terms of car parking spaces, generally speaking, the local plan states a car parking space should be 2.4 metres by 4.8. Lancashire County Council seek 5.5 metres length from a driveway. Lancashire County Council have reviewed the application. They've been involved in it. They've had meetings with the applicants. They've negotiated changes that they've thought fit to seek, and those amendments have occurred. So the application has improved over its journey, and the car parking spaces comply with the local plan, and the Highway Authority affirm that they have no objections to that. So in terms of visitor spaces, there is no requirement for visitor spaces where there is dedicated car parking within the curtilage. The local plan states that free parking spaces was required for 4+ bedrooms and 2 parking spaces for up to 3 bedrooms, and that's been achieved on the site, and LCC affirm that they have no objections. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, Janet, we'll take questions one at a time, I think.
Yeah.
That was a bit, yeah. Councillor Baker, did you have a question?
Microphone on, thank you. I'm not going to disagree that 129 is around 125. I think we're all happy with that. Would you explain where the 125 came from then? On what basis did you determine that? Because you saw me a little bit with the houses. You said if there were 125 small houses, we could fit that into a quarter of the site. But by putting bigger houses on, we get them more cramped together, creating all the problems that I relate to as a material considerations, which you quite easily dismiss. And I just think it's wrong. So I would like an explanation of how we actually arrived at 125 houses in the first place. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Mayor. I find it difficult to answer that because I've not been involved in that local plan process. So, you know, I wouldn't want to mislead you. I'm sure it was a proper process to come up with that figure, which was obviously agreed and through the plan process and with the inspector. But I can't give you a proper answer.
Elizabeth.
She's not listening, please.
Elizabeth, would you like to?
Could you ask that question?
Would you like to come?
Do you want to come down?
I think officers can. It's
Yeah.
officers, yeah.
We'll get officers to explain what we're at. The ones who were directly involved. No,
No, she's come down.
There.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Yeah, the provisional figures for the housing allocation were worked out obviously on the size of the sites, on an assumed density that was sort of reflecting the policies in, is it HS3 or HS4, the standard density policies, and then they would be adjusted up and down for taking account of any constraints on site, the size and shape of the site, the type of housing mix that we were looking for. So that exercise was done for the local plan. And as Janet said, the figure that the developer has come up with through his own design is quite similar to what officers were anticipating in terms of the numbers. So that was all done through the local plan, and the inspector asked us questions on the same as you have. How had we done that and what exercise we went through? And so that's how it was done.
Okay. Go on then. Microphone.
Oh, yes, by all means have the microphone on. Back to the 125 then. Were there any 2-bedroom properties planned on that site? Or are you saying it was always going to be 3- and 4-bedroom properties? In which case, you get my bit about the density. The bigger the property, the more they squeeze together, the less parking and all the other things for the sustainability reasons. If they were all tiny houses, 125 two-bedroom properties, apart from the fact it says 70% 3 and 4, there still is 30% that, to my mind, was planned originally at two-bed properties, possibly even affordable housing, which has suddenly kicked back and out of it again. Because, oh, we don't want affordable housing with people living in two-bedroom houses. We only want rich people in 3 and 4-bedroom houses. Thank you, Helen.
Can you answer that?
Yes, in coming up with the figure, you would assume that the average floor space of the house of the type that you are envisaging to work out how many would fit on the site, because as you say, smaller units with space around them, you could theoretically fit more or have a smaller site. So that all went into the exercise in determining how many houses the site could comfortably take whilst meeting all the policy requirements of the local plan for design and all the other factors mentioned. And the developer's done a similar exercise and come up with a similar but slightly higher number.
Okay. Councillor Towneley, did you have a question?
Yes, just simply to say that I don't, there is method in my madness asking for all of them to be upgraded. And if there was no threat to the passage of higher users through the site at a later date, I wouldn't be requesting it to be put under the 106. I wouldn't be asking the 106 to be reconditioned. One of the reasons being that I'm not entirely sure that the internal roads will be adopted by Lancashire County Council, which will in fact make this a private residential development with no access to other people. And secondly, if it was intended that these roads would be passable by all, then presumably it would be extinguishment of the public footpaths and not simply diversion.
You answer that one?
I think I would probably defer to Janet on the questions of the actual adoption of the highways, having the process in the application.
Janet, can you answer that one?
The intention for the public footpaths will be that the alternative routes will be along adopted routes. So the intention is that those roads will be adopted, in which case there's no reason to believe that there would be need for a rededication of those for a public bridle ways. So it would be just, by doing so, it would be just a safety measure in case the roads aren't adopted. But that would be a very unusual circumstance if that was to occur.
Thank you. Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And can I first of all say thank you to Janet and Elizabeth for standing up here and clarifying some questions. Like Councillor Shaw was saying, I've never been on planning, so I'm a novice to planning. But in the whole of my 12, 13, 14 years of being a councillor, I've never been through a process that we brought this to the full council. And I think I've not heard any argument yet from any councillors, members supporting this application. But I've come here with an open mind. And a question I need to ask the officers is, first of all, this is for my own personal understanding, is, has there ever been a situation where a local plan has stipulated some development and an application has gone in and subsequently members of the council itself, because through its development control committee, has rejected that, and that's come through judicial review and it's cost the council significant money? I don't know if you can answer that, maybe it's other people. But second point I need to ask you, if possible you can answer this question, is when we adopted the local plan, and there was different stages of the local plan, and it took a lot of effort and hard work, and salute to your efforts, but there was a stage in the local plan where you could unpick certain sections of the local plan, and members of the public could, councillors could express their concerns about particular sites in the local plan. I did that exercise at one particular site, but was there any concern registered, and then you had the planning inspector from Bristol looked at particular section of the local plan. For this site in particular, did the planning inspector make any contribution or any comments specifically on this site? Thank you.
Is that your question? Yeah. That's probably one more for you, isn't it, Ilse?
Yeah. Yes, there were unresolved objections, which is the phrase at the submission stage on the local plan. So they went in front of the inspector, and there were discussions about this particular site. He did actually have discussions about most of the sites and asked for information, but where people had outstanding objections, certain people appeared and spoke and sat around the table, and all the outstanding objections were considered by the inspector.
So you consider it all?
Yeah.
Yeah, they were looked at, yeah. Councillor Graham.
Mayor, I think most of the questions I was going to ask have actually been answered. They relate to the local plan process, and we do seem to be spending quite some time rerunning the local plan process. We have an adopted plan, adopted in 2018, and we shouldn't really be going through that again. Thank you.
Sorry. I think so. No more questions. I think we'll now move to the vote.
I didn't realise that you were finishing everything for
Sorry.
comments.
Sorry, just before they go. Thank you, Janet and Elizabeth. Thank you.
Am I allowed to add a comment or not?
If you're very quick. And you're not going to repeat everything that everybody's just said.
No, it's very simple, really, I think,
thank
really. I've just jotted a few things down that I have heard what everybody said, and I can understand and agree with lots of the concerns. Yes. I do live in a small village myself, Hapton, and I've seen over the years many major housing developments that have come into our village. But for me, as a councillor within Burnley, the bottom line is that I think, from all the advice and everything that we've been given, that even if we vote to stop this development, in the end, it will still be allowed. That's my understanding and reading of it. And it will have cost us thousands and thousands. I want to put the other side for all the residents of Burnley here. It will have cost us thousands upon thousands. You talked right at the beginning about a gun. Let me finish, Howard. Councillor Baker, please.
No problem.
Well, sit down then. And just
I'm raising a point of order,
yeah,
for
well,
which I have to indicate...
Councillor Baker, can you turn your microphone off?
What have you? About a gun to your head. In an appeal. So we are where we are. That's what I'm saying to people. And the way forward for me, for the good of everybody, is to allow this development, but in consultation, taking all the points that have been said, in consultation with the developer, for them to hopefully take them on board. Because this way, it will save all the residents of Burnley money that we can ill afford to spend, and we have to really think about that seriously as councillors, I believe, and then change the plan in the future for those developments that people have really still got a lot of concerns about. And I just want to say one thing to Councillor Birtwistle about the education, and probably to my friend over here as well, that we are aware, that a lot of our people here in Burnley, and I mean, you know, a lot of people might not like what I'm going to say, but actually don't support their local schools when their children are in an area. They transport and they travel out with their children outside of the borough, or even to schools across town, which they think will do a better job for their children. So all I'm saying is, I know the education is really, really important, but we just have to think about that as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Point of order, Chair.
Yes.
If I may. I'm sorry that Councillor Foster didn't hear my speech correctly. I was rushing it to try and get it through. The point of order being that we are not trying to stop this development. No way I want to stop this development. I want the development to go ahead. But you got to it in your last bit. We want to discuss it again with the thing, change it and do it. If we bring it tonight, it goes through exactly as it stands now, no changes of anything, Councillor Foster. I think we need to pause it at this stage, and I would have proposed that we adjourn for a week to get round to talking with the developer again and see if we can get something done.
We are going to move to the vote.
Point of order as well, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Fewings.
Just on the basis that...
Can I ask members to be quiet?
On the basis that someone has put forward that, you know, the applicant could bring a legal case which would involve costs for the council, I just for balance want to make it clear that the residents could also bring a judicial review for any decision we make tonight, so that would also incur legal costs.
I think that was... Sorry. Right, we are going to move to the vote now. We're going to vote on whether to accept or to refuse. Sorry, we're going to vote to accept. So, those...
Name vote, please, Madam Mayor.
Have we got any people wanting a named vote? Yeah. We'll have a named vote.
Can I just clarify what we voted?
We're voting to accept, aren't we?
Yeah. I just stress that.
Yeah, we are going to... We are voting.
Can I just stress that the current vote at this moment in time is whether to approve the officer recommendation to approve the application, if you're for or against approval of the application.
Okay. We'll move to the vote now.
Okay. Councillor Anwar? Baker? Birtwistle? Briggs? Brindle? Campbell? Cant? Chowdhury? Commis? Emo? Ferrier? Fewings? Foster? Gill? Graham? Hall? Harbour? Oscar?
Definitely against.
Hussain? Ishak? Johnston? Sorry, did you?
Abstain.
Abstain. So Ishak. Johnston? Kelly?
Against.
Khan Arif? Khan Lubna? Khan Shabana? Khan Wajid?
For.
Lishman Gordon? Lishman Margaret? Lone? McCann? Martin? Mahana? Mottishead? Newhouse? Pate? Payne Emma? Payne Mark? Raja? Roper? Royal? Sumner? Tatchell? Towneley?
All right. Yeah, the motion to approve falls. So we now need...
Just,
Can we have the numbers? 9 for, 26 against, 8 abstentions. So we now haven't got a motion.
may I just ask, before we go, before a member, presume a member is going to put forward a vote for a motion for refusal. Before they do so, do they want to? Some members want to get together and put forward and put together reasons so that officers can sort of go through them with officers. Would that help? Just putting it out there.
Councillor Towneley.
Can I suggest that Councillor Baker has many and varied reasons against this, and that we use that as the basis for our next vote?
I was going to suggest, members, that we have a 5-minute break.
Yeah. Madam Mayor, I was delayed in the start of looking into this by a week because I got a delay in getting a response back from planning about some evidence that I required to help me with tonight. So that's knocked me back a bit. I would suggest I'm only 2/3 of the way through finding material reasons at the moment. So I would like some... Now, the reasons can surely follow rather than have to be given tonight. But you can have the ones I've given you tonight, but I don't see why the reasons are because it's contrary to those policies. No problems with that. But the actual reasons that we'll need to go to a legal side of it, I will push through later. And I don't like the way the democracy is telling me no.
My view is that if somebody was to move the application for refusal, when moving that application, they should state the substantial reasons at that moment in time. That doesn't not necessarily mean that if the matter was to go to appeal, you may not want to put forward other reasons. Whether or not the planning inspector takes that into consideration, that is his decision.
Yeah.
I will live with the reasons that's documented in my 10-page report here, councillors.
Right, 5 minutes. Yes. Right, sorry. Is it a point of order? Sorry, is it a point of order, Councillor Lishman? Is it a point of order?
It's a point of order in that I think we've had a long and fairly detailed debate that's brought forward quite a lot of information that wasn't available beforehand. And I think people have expressed quite a lot of views that I'm sure that the developer hasn't had the opportunity to listen to in detail before. He's got a clear view of what the concerns are of this council and of the local people that live in that area. This may mean that we're in a position where there is some wriggle room that we need to be thinking about. And I am concerned that there is an appearance that we're being pushed into developing clear reasons for refusal when some of us don't know. We've had 1 hour of planning training and don't have a clear view. And I don't want to be in a position where we're saying no to something on particular grounds that I'm not clear about because I don't know enough, that is going to have potentially large financial implications for this council, that we arrive at those reasons in 5 minutes of adjournment. And that's the point that I wanted to make.
Adjourn for 10 minutes, 15? 15 minutes. Right, we're going to adjourn for 15 minutes, so can I ask members to be back in here by 8:30?
Members of the council, ladies and gentlemen, please good standing. Thank you.
Can we resume the meeting? Councillor Payne?
Madam Mayor, can I move suspension of standing orders in accordance with CPR 22.1 to allow the meeting to continue for an hour beyond 9:30 until 10:30 p.m.
Will somebody second it? Thank you, Councillor Mottershead. Those in favour? Put your hand down, Councillor Johnson. Those against? Oh, you all want to come back, do you? The motion is... Do you want to do it again, Alison? Do you need to... Sorry, can we do that again? There was some confusion there. Those in favour of suspending standing orders?
Can I just do a point of order before we do that? If we vote this down, does it mean that we can't have a variation on this? I'm just concerned that there are people in the chamber who might have a disability that means they need to eat something. There are people with children, and I'm just wondering whether a more appropriate motion would be to extend standing orders until we finish this item of business, rather than just for an hour.
Councillor Payne, would you be happy to accept that amendment? Councillor Mottershead, would you be happy to? So the motion now...
Mayor, I would support what Councillor Fewings has said.
Right. We've just had half an hour's break. An hour? Yeah. Yeah. Right. Those who are in favour of suspending standing orders until this decision has been made, till this item has been decided, please show. Thank you, then that's carried. Councillor Towneley. Members, please.
Madam Mayor, may I move a motion to refuse with reasons?
Can we have your reasons?
Those reasons being HS2, lack of affordable housing on site, and the reasons lack of evidence for not having affordable housing on site, and the continued segregation of perceived stereotypes within the town. SP5, quality and sustainability. 1C, on-site renewable energy provision, and 1D, contribution to community renewables. While traditional energy efficiency has been catered for, no strategy for carbon reduction has been forthcoming. SP52D, enhancement and or biodiversity loss has not been satisfactorily mitigated for such a prominent gateway. SP53A, where it is a key gateway, account must be taken of 2, landmark tree planting, and 4, gentle transitions to avoid and gentle transition from landscape to urban scenery. We do not feel this has been satisfactorily dealt with. IC4, infrastructure and planning conditions, lack of educational contribution. HS1, allocations suggest overdevelopment of the site based on housing size. IC3, lack of practical parking and exacerbated congestion both in and out of the development. And I'm afraid that's all I have at the moment. I think they are perfectly satisfactory.
Is that seconded? Councillor Newhouse, thank you. So we're voting for Councillor Townley's motion.
Point of order, can we speak on it?
Yes, you can do, if any member would like to.
Can I speak now?
You can.
Okay.
Councillor
I'm
Foster.
just really disappointed in the sense I was under the impression when we broke that there was conversations happening between different groups with the developer, and that we were going to go and speak and negotiate with the developer first to see if the concerns that had been raised could be answered or could be brought to a conclusion for everybody. And I'm really disappointed because what we've done now is if this motion goes through, we are voting for a big bill for this borough. Well, I believe it is true from all what my understanding is, and I have to stand for not just one group of residents. I'm really sorry for that because I really understand all the upset and everything and all the concerns, but we've got to think of the whole of the town and all our residents who will have to pick up that bill. So I just need to say that.
Just a moment. Can I just respond to the first part of that? There have been a lot of discussions going on. What we didn't want to be perceived is that decisions have been being made behind closed doors with small groups of people, and that is why it has come back to the full council. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You know, Madam Mayor, in politics, it's very, very easy to tell people what they want to hear. It's very difficult to tell people what they don't want to hear. And many members over here have told the public gallery what it does want to hear. Only Councillor Foster has so far told the public gallery what it doesn't want to hear. What the public gallery doesn't want to hear is that these are very, very thin planning grounds for turning this down. Very thin indeed. And you know, an appeal is inevitable. This is on YouTube. And Councillor Mrs. Lishman, I think you guaranteed that the appeal will be lost when you said earlier, well, we decide what the grounds that we refused are later, because we don't know what they are. That will be played over and over to the inspector, because that is what you said.
The point of explanation, Madam Mayor, was that I was trying to explain myself and my position, my lack of knowledge in planning, and my inability to do what Councillor Towneley has done, which is to put forward those planning reasons for objection. And I was saying that I wasn't of a mind that we could achieve that within the 5-minute break that was suggested.
Okay. I would suggest that you can't verify what you said. Madam Mayor, the planning grounds are incredibly spurious. Planning grounds are very, very spurious for what is being moved. An appeal is now inevitable. As night follows day, as the sun rises in the morning, this developer will appeal. And as night follows day, because of some of the more outrageous comments that we heard, for instance, Councillor Towneley talking about planning wonks. We heard Councillor Towneley saying, dire though those consequences are, in the full knowledge that this is going to happen. We heard you, Councillor Birtwistle, the leader of telling the gallery what it wanted to hear, that you had a gun with a £100,000 bullet at your head. Yeah. That is the reality, Councillor Birtwistle. The costs will be awarded against this council. Now, let's not forget, this is a small district council with very serious financial problems, so serious that we have a planning team that can hardly cope with a major application like this, as, and with the greatest of respect to our officers, has been so clearly displayed over the last few weeks. But you know, I don't represent Cliviger. I don't live in Cliviger. Occasionally I drive through Cliviger. My neighbours don't live in Cliviger. My constituents don't live in Cliviger. But like everybody else, they're going to have to pick up the tab, which could be £200,000. So whilst you people have told the public gallery what they want to hear, what you've had is some very, very expensive rounds of applause. That is the reality. The vote today should be, is it fair to inflict a lost cause on the rest of the town, which inevitably will be lost on appeal? There are no grounds to turn this planning application down, and it ought to be carried.
Councillor Towneley.
How dare Councillor Johnson say that I shouldn't represent my ward, and how dare he think that this large development will not have further repercussions all across this town? That is what I stand for. I'm willing to stand by my principles. You may not like the reasons, and we may be on tricky ground, but unless we put this to the test, we will never know. And we will be open to any developer wishing to come and do whatever they like if we do not fight this. Some of us have beliefs.
Sorry, Councillor Baker next.
I agree with Councillor Foster over there. I'm very frustrated as well. Normally at a development control meeting, there's an option at the end to say, right, we're against this, we're minded to disapprove it. Would the officers like to go away and talk to the developer, see if we can come to some accommodation on the conditions and the points that I've raised and others have raised tonight? But it was pushed through to us tonight by the people up there at the top table that we had to make a decision tonight. We couldn't defer it, we couldn't do anything, talk to the commission, we had to make a decision. And that's where the frustration comes from me, that we don't have the opportunity, as you say, to talk to them. Because they seem very accommodating. I think we could have come to an agreement between us, but we're being forced into it.
That doesn't happen at development control. There's no discussion after development control.
May I just clarify Councillor Baker's point? There was ample opportunity provided to elected members, and group leaders were in that room. If members were minded to defer this decision, that's been moved, that members can defer this. You may not have been in the room at that moment in time, but it was discussed. Now, group leaders have discussed it with their respective groups, and they have come to a decision on that. But I would just like to clarify that the top table, as you refer to, did not say those things.
Can I withdraw my comments then? But it would have been nice to have been told that we could have deferred it, because I never heard anything like that, Chair.
Down to your group leader, yeah. Councillor Fewings.
Thank you, Matt. I just want to pick up on this point of the idea that you can't say no to people, and I think that there are two stakeholders here. There's the developer and there's the residents, and I don't agree with Councillor Johnston that by... Sorry, was that a point of clarification? Do you want to put your mic on? Oh.
Okay, Councillor Fewings.
I don't agree with Councillor Johnston that we're playing to the gallery in the same way that I think he would be upset as a Labour councillor that he's playing to the developer and their profits. It's not appropriate for you to say that. What we are doing is we're looking at the merits of this application. We're given a list of policies as to why we think this doesn't comply with the local plan. The best way forward for the developer would be to resubmit the application without a cost and try and address some of the concerns that have been raised in the gallery. And I think that the people who are increasing the likelihood of an appeal being lost are the people that are now, after we've rejected approval, talking about dunk that we will lose an appeal when actually they've not engaged in the process of coming up with planning application rejection. So I think that actually we need to understand that we already, as a council, rejected approval this evening, and therefore we would be left in limbo if we didn't do something else. This is the something else, and the point about rejecting have already happened. This is, you know, we already rejected approval, so.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I thought I ought to make just a couple of comments on Councillor Johnston's intervention. I thought it was, for him, unusually clear, despite the occasional flashes of verbal and intellectual incoherence we normally associate with him.
Okay, thank you.
The difficulty, I may say, Madam Mayor, is that if you put yourself in a position in which people can patronise you, it's difficult for others to avoid the opportunity. My understanding is that there were 2 points of substance in what he was saying. The first of those was about the effect on residents in other parts of the borough of the decision. This is not just a decision about Cliviger and Worsthorne, because the implications of this decision affect future applications throughout the whole of the rest of the borough. So the decision we're making now is one with implications for the whole of the town. The second point he was making was his concern that people had said things during the debate which might be quoted in the context of an appeal and used to undermine that appeal. What better way to undermine the appeal than to stand up in the council chamber and say the things which can in future be quoted coming from a senior councillor as actually undermining the view which a substantial majority of the council has already taken. And if we're looking at people who are undermining the position of the council and its authority, then I suspect Councillor Johnson doesn't have to look any further than the mirror.
Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's not often that I stand up and speak purely because if I have an opinion on something, people generally know about it, and I don't need to speak to show anyone that I have a voice. The only reason why I'm speaking is because we've been here, as everyone knows, since 6:30. I have a newborn at home. I've left my newborn to be here because it's such an important issue that we need to speak about. And what I feel like is it's becoming a competition. If you say something, I can say something doubly worse back to you, and it's very childish. I'm sick to death of it, actually. I would like to go home. And I voted just a few minutes ago so that we could put this matter to rest. I see people, members of the public in the gallery, rubbing their eyes, looking at their watches. It's totally unfair. And just to score points, I just think it's ridiculous. I don't even know what we're talking about anymore, if I'm honest with you. We had a break to decide something. I don't know if we're talking about that now or if we're still trying to just argue between ourselves. What I would like is, please, some movement on this. And I would like for a matter to come to an end. Otherwise, I will be leaving and going home because I do think it's ridiculous. All right, thank you.
I understand.
Can I try to move that this vote put to...
Madam Mayor, could I move that the vote be taken? No.
I've got two more people who've been waiting a long time to speak. Councillor Anwar and then Councillor Campbell, and then we'll wind up the debate.
Just a couple of quick points. The first one is that, again, going back to the whole thing about planning applications come to our committee, and if the impression that I was given, or I might be wrong, was that we are allowed to make this decision. But from the officers on the night, we were given the impression that you're not allowed to refuse this. If we're not allowed to refuse an application, why is it coming to committee and asking members for a decision? But I'm going to pick up on another point, again, which a colleague of mine has made about, about playing to the galleries. I reject that as well. I reject that on the basis that because I vote on principle. Anybody who knows me knows that I speak and I vote on principles and my values. So I reject that we're playing to the galleries. This is an important issue. And although I represent Bancoal, I think it's important to make a point that, well, actually, as elected members, we represent everybody in our town. We represent the whole of this town. The final thing that I want to make a point on is that we heard the officer say, and other colleagues have made a mention of this as well, is that this issue of a slam dunk and that there will be a £100,000 fine or whatever it might be. But in actual fact, I was informed during the break that group members were offered the opportunity to defer, which the officer has also confirmed as well. So why then was that option to defer, why was that refused? That's what I want to know, and that option was there. It's been taken off the table, not by this group, but actually members across there, and I'd like to know why that is.
Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to completely echo what Anwar just said. During the break, we were said that a deferment was on the table. We've come out of that, and apparently it's off the table now. And we've just heard that it was a decision by group leaders that a deferment was not an option. But my understanding of here tonight is that we are sitting here instead of a DC meeting, and the DC meeting is not party political. We should not be having our options dictated by other party leaders. And I put myself completely in the position of Councillor Lishman over there. I'm being forced into making decisions that I don't feel I've had time to fully give time to. I don't think it's right. I think a decision to defer should be made available.
I did say we'd finish the debate. Councillor Payne, have you got something?
I'd just like to clarify that my personal position was to defer tonight as a group leader. I wanted to defer this. I think it's a reasonable thing to speak with the developer who was being very reasonable, and that was my choice would have been to defer this.
Yeah.
And that's, I just want it known that from my side that was my choice on it.
We have a motion on the table which we need to vote on first of all. Councillor Towneley has
just to clarify, if members vote for the motion to refuse and it passes, then we cannot have a subsequent motion to defer, so that will be final. So I just wanted to clarify that point.
There's a motion on the table.
So there's a motion to refuse the application. There's a motion to refuse the application on the table. If that motion is carried, i.e. it passes, then that's the end of the matter. Comment.
Sorry, can I make a point of order?
There isn't a motion on the table to defer.
Point of order. Can I make a point of...
Councillor Towneley, it's your motion.
Yeah, I want to make a point of order just before, because it's important about... So if the motion to reject is withdrawn, can it be resubmitted if the motion to defer is not passed? And my understanding and the basis on which I am minded to reject the application is that if we defer this application, we have still failed to determine this application in accordance with the timescales that we need to defer to decide it, and therefore we are also at risk of an appeal whether we have rejected it or deferred it.
Yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying. We can't bring the developer back in. Where do we go from? We've got a motion on the table.
No.
Sorry.
I think we can say that the developer said that they will do the extension.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, the developer has confirmed to group leaders, and the reason why, Councillor Campbell, we took it to group leaders to try and get 45 members in a room and trying to explain it. We thought it would be better if group leaders went, or deputy leaders, because Councillor Townsend's not here. It would be better for them to coordinate the responses with their respective groups. In terms of the developer has said that he would not pursue an appeal for a few weeks if the matter was deferred to a subsequent meeting of the council. It would require council to reconvene. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, just to carry on from there, one of the things that concerned us as well was that we didn't want people to say that these decisions are being made behind closed doors. All the discussions have been done in here, openly. And we didn't want to start making decisions behind people's backs and people turning around and saying these decisions have been made and you've come to some agreement behind closed doors. And that is why we brought it back to full council.
Point of order, Councillor. Madam Mayor, sorry. The Constitution says that members of the public aren't allowed to speak, but you can override the Constitution with your powers, and if you feel it would be a benefit to hear something from the developer that will help us all tonight, then I would say please let him speak.
Councillor Fewings, did you want to say something else then? Sorry. No? So I thought somebody had the hand up over there.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Hussain.
I'm just making 2 points. Point number 1 is we refuse this tonight and we all know we're going to lose an appeal. Or, if it goes to appeal, it's going to cost council. That's what I'm saying for the voice. Alright? On the other hand, we could negotiate. That'll be looked at again. I think, in benefit of Burnley people, I think it should be negotiated and put that option on the table.
We don't know the result of the appeal. Prejudging the result of the appeal.
In the light In the light of further discussion, I believe it in the best interests of the town, for the council itself and its integrity, and for the developer, for me to withdraw my motion and to put forward a motion for deferment. Would that be acceptable?
Will somebody second that?
Yeah.
We need a second. Sorry, sorry, Councillor Towneley, we need the person who seconded your motion to agree to withdraw. So you're
I'll
happy
agree
to
to
withdraw?
that. I'll be happy to
Okay.
withdraw that.
We need to get the consent of the meeting.
All those in favour say aye.
All those in...
No, let's be very clear what we're saying. So,
Yeah.
The withdrawal of the motion.
Yeah. Yes. The person... Councillor Newhouse seconded your motion and has agreed to its withdrawal. Yes. Those in favour of the withdrawal of Councillor Townley's motion. So that's carried. We need now somebody to make another motion in the nicest possible way. Councillor Townley.
What a surprise, thank you. And thank you also, members of the council, for bearing with us during this long evening. I would like to move a motion for deferment so that further discussion can take place between the developer and the council on behalf of residents. Is that acceptable to this chamber?
That would need to be seconded.
I'll second that motion.
No. Councillor Graham.
I'm sorry, but it can't be a long deferment. It's got to have an end date to it.
Councillor Townley.
The nearest date which fits in with the council calendar.
That's to the next full council meeting in December. That's too long, I think, because we're only in...
Well, I mean, when I say no, I didn't mean it for the full council. I meant we can have another extraordinary one, but it still needs to fit in with the council timetable.
Members have said earlier that we have meetings where everyone can attend, so we keep to the schedule.
2 weeks, Madam Mayor.
No, we're going back to what was said earlier about meetings. You know, if people have got the holidays planned again, we need to stick within the council schedule.
We have reports that we've got.
Shall I suggest that at the very latest, the next meeting of full council, which is in December, at the very latest, we could have an extraordinary meeting in the interim if necessary.
No, we can't. Yes, please.
Sorry, a bit of indulgence here. None of us have gone through this before. I quite agree with that. What I meant was, as near as we can get, which fits in with the council timetable, which could be an extraordinary meeting, but we leave the date to the officers who will get back to us at the earliest, basically.
As soon as possible. Are you happy to second that, Councillor Newhouse?
Sure, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So, the motion is now for deferment. Those in favour? Please tell me we don't have to go through this again. So the meeting is... So that motion is passed, and the meeting is now adjourned.
Till further notice.
Till further notice.
Yeah.
Sorry? Those against? You're against an adjournment? Okay. Okay.